Today we are going to make a drop top epoxy filled Claro walnut top Strat style guitar body. You're about to see a really cool instructional video on how I did this drop top S-style, Strat style guitar with the epoxy filled Claro walnut top that we did in the last episode. But before we go on, I have two things I'd like to talk to you about. And if you don't have time for those and you just want to get to the meat, then just fast forward this video to the point down below and that will bypass this. I recorded the video you're about to see about 5 or 6 weeks ago now. And it's not that I don't have topics or subjects that I want to kind of share with everybody and do videos on them. It really becomes a management of my time, and my time is almost non-existent because it takes a lot of time for me to do the post-productions on these videos. About a 30-minute instructional video takes me about 10 hours to record and produce, and maybe only 2 hours that is recording, and about 8 hours is the post-production that I do in order to, make it a little bit more concise, if I can say that, as long as my videos are. But just try to weed out some of the stuff that's not important to what I'm trying to teach. And that's time that I haven't had recently. Now, I'm not complaining about that, because I'll tell you, one of the primary reasons that I don't have any time is because the business is growing pretty dramatically to the point where I just don't have time to put out all the orders that are coming in and the products of the templates and the tools and the jigs and things like that, and still building guitars. And do the videos at the same time. And again, mostly it's the post-production side of the house. So that is a limiting factor I know I've got to address. Now, don't take this as a sign that if you've been buying stuff, you should stop buying stuff, because I really do sincerely and honestly and humbly appreciate all of the folks have been supporting what I'm doing here by buying the templates, tools, and jigs, and guitars and stuff like that. So that is awesome. So keep doing it, and I do appreciate it a bunch. Point number 2 is about 5 or 6 weeks ago, sometime after my last video, I established a Patreon site. All right, and I've never been one to really want to do that, to be honest. I have never taken a dime from YouTube for any of the videos that I do, and I never had any intention on doing it. But I had some of my customers / subscribers / viewers of my videos really ask me to do this. And the last gentleman was pretty persuasive. He said, "You're providing a really valuable service, whether it be the videos or the emails I answer and things like that. And people want to support what you're doing. And just because you sign up for Patreon doesn't mean that they have to pay you money. It's their choice." So it made sense to me, because I'm a big guy on freedom of choice. And so therefore, okay, I'll do it, but I'm not really sure what it involves and what I've got to do. And so I tried to set something up, and it's still in development. But the point is, he's right, okay, it's totally up to the individual whether they want to support what I do. Now, if you're buying stuff from me, you're supporting indirectly or maybe directly what I do. But for the video content, it's interesting, but I think I just figured out a way to solve my problems. And the problem is lack of time for the post-production of my videos. And I've decided that if those of you that are able to support on a monthly basis through the Patreon site, and I'll put a link in the description below, you can click on it and you can go right there and you can read the information and make your choice. But for those that do, I'm going to take all of the revenues that come in from the Patreon, and I'm going to try to find, preferably local, but I don't even think that matters anymore, someone who is professional that can do the post-production on my videos. If I can do that, I could probably record 4 videos for the same amount of time that I would put out one video. And that will allow me to get through some of the topics that I've been wanting to do that I just haven't had time to do. And some of them that I owe you, because I've mentioned to people who said, hey, I need to do a video on that radius block sanding beam. I need to do a video on that new Floyd Rose routing template and show you how that works, because there's a lot of details that I really need to show to help you understand how you can utilize it and how it'll help you do what you do better. So that's what I had to talk about. I'm going to get into the video. It's a long video. It was probably too much to cover in one video, and I know you folks are really good about watching a lot of the content, so hopefully you'll enjoy the whole thing. But I wanted to point that out. If you want to support the videos that I make and allow me to put out more by helping me fund to hire someone to do my post-production, then supporting me through Patreon will be the way that I'll be able to do that. So that's all I have to say. And now on to the pre-recorded video from like 6 weeks ago. Hope you enjoy it. So today we are building upon 8A that we did in last episode. And if you saw my most recent video about taking a fractured guitar top and really using it and making it special and custom, then you'll kind of recognize this from that last video. But we're going to be working with this top. Now, I've got a guest with me today. We've got a gentleman named Sam. Sam is a high school student at a local high school, and he reached out to me about doing a capstone project, and I had no idea what that was. When I was in school way back in the days, we didn't do things like that. We didn't get to do fun things. It was all about hard things. So, Sam, what is the deal?
I came here to see the shop and what he does making guitars on a daily basis, and he was kind enough to help me in this wonderful endeavor that I will fail if I don't do. So there's a bit of pressure, but
and you won't graduate if you don't get this done.
I won't be allowed to.
He'll have to be in 12th grade a second year, which really isn't a bad thing. If you guys that are a little older, know that high school is not really a bad gig. Anyway, so the main thing is follow around some profession.
Some profession, yeah.
And get 2 days and see what it's about and write a paper on what it's all about and what you learned by following around that person within that profession.
Yeah, and I get to do a 7-page research topic on a controversy in the field.
Controversy? So, there's controversy in guitar making?
Yeah, I was kind of concerned about what I would do for it. And then I was like, I wonder if there's any controversies. And then I heard about this thing called relicking a guitar. And I really don't know how I feel about it.
I tell you, some of the viewers can help out Sam you could definitely write some comments of controversial things. I tend to stay away from controversy because I think that in guitar making, no one thing is the secret weapon.
Yeah, absolutely.
What I talk about and what I do is try to use high quality materials, high quality parts, and build things very well, craftsmanship, okay? And I think when you combine those things, you're going to have a really nice instrument, okay?
I think I agree.
But there is definitely types of wood, tone woods, the things that you talked about, to relic or not to relic, and there's tons of different things that people get all spun up about on forums and things like that you could certainly find to write about.
Yep.
So anyway, if you want to give Sam some ideas, great. But he's going to be following me along today and kind of reviewing this process. And if he's got something like really some like wisdom that he just gained that you've got to share with the world, then we'll do that too.
There might be a few dumb comments, but we'll see.
And the dumber the better, because that'll make more fun. No, I'm just kidding. But anyway, so we're going to start with this. Now, what I wanted to really start talking about is why we're doing an 8B. Remember, I'm going off of the same kind of build documents that I use when I teach this in the college. And if you haven't seen any other episode than this one, go back to the beginning. But in each episode, I say, if you send an email through the contact page of the website, the link is down below, okay, then I will send you these documents so you can follow along with your build. I think that's pretty cool. Doesn't that sound cool?
I think so.
Yeah, of course. And so anyway, a lot of people are doing that, and that'll help you follow along. But in part 8, we were covering things like routing wire channels, drilling holes, routing cavities, neck pocket, bandsawing out the body, flush cutting the body, and things like that. And in 8A, we actually took this guitar and we did it in a more conventional way, which is a top-loading guitar that is, we did the swimming pool route, which was kind of unique, but we did it in a more conventional Strat way. But I'm building in parallel a second guitar because there's other ways to do Strat type and Strat style guitars. And in this one, we're going to do a rear cavity so that we don't have a pick guard, so that we can take advantage of not covering up this beautiful walnut, but we can see as much as the walnut as possible by having rear cavities. So we're using a whole different template set that basically has different controls here, and it's got the 1/8" pin so you can punch your own controls for whatever, and then drill them out for whatever size potentiometer and things like that. So there's unique features of doing a rear access. This is a separate template set. If you're looking on my website for the Strat style, we call it Suite S, because we're trying to kind of alleviate any copy protection stuff, you know, saying this is a Stratocaster template. Okay, so it's called the Suite S series, but it's basically a Strat style guitar system, and you'll see it in the conventional, you'll see it in the front loading, you'll see it in a 24 fret version for a more modern.
I might want to get one of those.
Yeah, and then I think we've got other variations too, but this is going to be one of those variations that I'm going to use today. So in the last episode, the 8A episode, I should say, we actually cut out the perimeter of the guitar first. All right.
Okay.
And I talked about the order of operations sometimes is very specific for a very specific reason, and sometimes it doesn't matter. In this case today, I'm going to cut out the profile, or at least most of the profile, I'm going to save for later, just to kind of show you guys that sometimes it doesn't matter. You got to figure out what's the best order of operation for you and the tools you have and how you like to use those tools. That's going to make a difference. All right, Sam, you ready for this?
I sure hope so.
Okay.
I haven't done a whole lot of this, so
yeah.
this is going to be
this is using obviously templates to accomplish certain things and making it easy. A template gives you repeatability, right?
Yeah.
So you can do it once, you can do it 100 times, and they're going to be exactly the same. It's almost like the CNC stuff I was showing you and we were talking about, except, you know, this is kind of like a handheld CNC in a case, because it's guaranteeing that accuracy. So this step, since we're working with, let me just show this real quick, but since we're working with our, what I'm calling the environmental block, oh, and I didn't mention this earlier, when I'm doing rear cavity access, I like to do a slice off the back to use as the cavity covers, so that the cavity covers kind of blend in with the back. So
they don't stand out too much.
Yeah, I think it's just a nice touch. So with this block of wood that we call the environmental series, because it's just using scrap wood rather than throwing it away and creating a nice cool little body blank out of it, the first step that I have to do when I'm going to be using a figured top of some sort on top of this, the easiest thing to do is to create the wire routes now and then glue the top on, and that way we don't have to worry about taking a drill with a big long drill bit at an angle and trying to connect pickup cavity to electronics cavity, you know, with that method. Okay.
That sounds kind of like a pain.
Yeah, it is. It is a pain. And if you've ever drilled a hole at an angle into a guitar top and then realized you went too far and went through the backside of the guitar, that's a little frustrating. So what this template is, it's the neck pocket template, but we're not going to do the neck pocket in our order of operations right now, because we'll do that after the top is glued on, and we'll do it all in one operation. So before we glue the top on, really the only thing I need is the wire routes. Now when we use small cutouts like these are, it's better, instead of using a bearing guided bit, to go into that area and try to plunge down into the wood until the bearing is at a level where it will make contact with the acrylic. A better thing is to use something we call a bushing guide. So a bushing guide doesn't spin with the router bit, unlike the bearing, but it will actually just provide a blocking force. So I can take this and I can set it in the slot, and the bit is well above the wood, and then I can plunge down into the wood.
Yep.
Okay, and that's safer because if you have this type of guide, the hard part is that first dip into the wood. Are you going to get into the right spot without it kind of grabbing and pulling into the template, and then you've just ruined your template set? So this is why these type of cuts are better suited for a bushing guide rather than a bearing guide system. All right, so now we want to make these to a certain depth. So we can do it almost anything we want as long as it doesn't interfere with other components. Now the pickup cavities are going to be about 3/4 of an inch deep. So I could really go 3/4 from the top, but the top is 1/4 inch. So I could go about 1/2 inch down and it would be fine. So I don't know, I'm probably going to go something less than that, maybe 3/8, because 3/8 times 1/4 inch bit plus a little bit of side-to-side play will actually make it wider than 1/4 inch channel, and that depth will be more than enough, and I'll stay away from the dead bottom of the pickup cavity just in case, you know. There's no need to go the full depth unless you want to. So I tell people all the time, if you're building it, you do what you want. But that's what I recommend. So I'm going to go how deep?
3/8.
Ah, good job. See, he passed the first test already.
I know how to pay attention. What can I say?
All right, 3/8. Now, how many millimeters is 3/8? I got a metric system.
I no idea. It's a few.
Me neither. But it's somewhere around 10.
Do we have a ruler around here? No.
I do.
Somewhere.
I do, but it's 19 millimeters is 3/4, so half of 3/4 is 3/8. So it'll be slightly.
19, like what?
It'll be 9.5.
9.5.
It'll be about 9.5.
That's math, yeah.
Yeah, so that's.
Haven't done that in a while.
That's easy math. All right. So what I'm going to do is, if I take this router bit and I place it on the wood, and then I take this little measuring device and I put in just about a 10-degree gap, and I lock it down. Now this will only be able to plunge that amount.
Yep.
So my stop point will be right at the point that I need it to be.
Yep.
So every system, every router is different the way it functions, but pretty much every router does have a stop point setting system, other than maybe handheld, laminate trimmer routers don't. So a plunge router is really what you need for this operation, rather than a fixed base type of routing system. We want to plunge down into the wood once the bit is spinning. I was pointing out to Sam the importance of using hearing protection. These are loud tools, and yeah, you want to preserve your hearing. Your hearing is probably as good as it's ever going to be right now.
It was better at one point, but
yeah, the older we get, the more we lose.
Yep.
Right? What? Huh? What?
Sorry, what'd you say?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. All right, here we go. So we've got the 2 wire routes that we need to connect everything that we need connected, already routed. That is the last step. And I point this out every time I use these templates, but it's such an amazing thing. If you've never used other template systems before, then you're not going to appreciate it. But no masking tape and super glue, no double-sided tape whatsoever inside of here. It is just fit with the alignment pins, and it's in perfect alignment, and it stays in place. So we will come back to this template after we get the top glued on in order to do the neck pocket. So we'll set that aside, but we will need that a little later today. Now I'll put those pins back up to the top, and now anything else that we need to do underneath we can do now. This is kind of a time that I'm going to show something new that I came up with, and I think people are going to like this. I think so. So what I've come up with is something to help within the template system here to accomplish weight reduction. And weight reduction can be done many ways. I used to do it as simply as taking a Forstner bit of an appropriate size and drilling a bunch of holes in the body. So what I came up with was a template system that actually, and it's harder to see, but I'll give you a close-up on top of this guitar, and it allows it to overlay and align with the pins and give you options for areas of weight reduction. All right, so as I zoom in close here, what you're going to see is all these different pockets. Now what I did is I designed this to give as much flexibility as possible. For instance, that big, long, skinny one happens to be opposite of where a belly cut would be. You don't want to go as deep in those areas because that could cause issues. You may be able to go deeper in these areas that are away from the belly cut, but even this was planned out to the point, and see if I can see it, where if this is a top-loading guitar, all of the cavities, the weight reduction cavities, are away from even the swimming pool route, which is huge. It's even out from where the pickguard would be. Look at that little engraving right there. Shows you where a pickguard screw would be and where another pickguard screw would be. Every pickguard screw would go through that top that covers this up, and it would then go into fresh wood, so that you would never have a problem with it, stripping out because it was only going through a 1/4 inch top and that's it. So that's the idea, but doesn't mean you have to use all of these. It's just optional based upon how much weight relief that you believe you want to achieve and how you want to balance that weight relief. There's a lot of factors that come into play in that. But anyway, the point of this is it gives you options. So I was showing you this one, which is based upon a top-loading configuration. Now, when we talk about weight relief for the rear axis cavity, it's mostly the same, but it's slightly different. All right, so I'll give you a close-up of this one. So in the belly cut area, it's exactly the same. And we still have the spacing for whatever cavities we're going to use, whatever tremolo system that we're going to use is all right there. However, I stopped it short, and you'll see the engraving of where the electronics cavity is going to be. You'll in fact see the wire route and how it intersects the pickup and electronics cavities for routing purposes. All right, so this way we avoid it because that's going to be routed with a different template from the back after the top is glued on. All right, so this one's slightly different. This is the rear access, rear cavity, no pickguard version of the weight reduction template, which if it's not on the website right now, it will be very shortly. And I think that is a great addition for any of you that have already purchased the Stratocaster style Suite S template system from me. This will go right with it and help you out with another task. So now what we're going to do is we're going to route out all these areas. On this case, we are going to go back to a bearing guided bit because that is going to work more effectively on these larger areas. I'm going to mark them out first so I at least know where the areas are. And I've got a thought process in mind for what the depth of these different areas will be.
Okay.
One of the most critical ones is the belly cut area. Now, when I do a belly cut, we're starting with 1 3/4 thick of wood. My typical belly cut is going to be about 3/4 inches from the far back to the highest point of the edge. That'll be the deepest part of the belly cut.
Yep.
3/4 of an inch. I'm going to remove 0.5. So then once the top is, it's like that, the bottom of it is 3/4 inch from the top, 3/4 of an inches from the back could be the belly cut, and that leaves us a good solid 1/4 inch in between the two as room for error.
Yep.
Okay? So we'll go 0.5. Now these other ones can go all the way to the back.
Yep.
So this is 1.5 inches left. I could go 1 1/4 inches deep. I'm going to be a little bit conservative on that, and I'm going to just do 0.5 up here. I'm going to do 1.0 here, 1.0, 1.0. These, and we'll talk about this later, this is going to be part of the forearm contour. So I'm going to go, let's go 0.75 for this one, and then 1.0 there. And then these can all be 1.0, 1.0, 1.0. And this one, I'm going to go a little deeper. 1.5, 1.25. I'm going to go 1.25. So that'll leave me 1/4 inch from the back of the guitar because I've got other purposes for that. All right, and that's all the routing that we're going to do for weight reduction to get it under the top when we glue the top on.
Yep.
All right, you following me on this? Everybody following me on this? I think the math makes sense, and we'll just follow this instructions. Now, what I talked about before is instead of taking this bit and just plunging down and routing all of this out, the best thing is to drill some Forstner bit holes. Now, I'm just gonna go and drill one larger hole in each of these cavities so there's a place for this to go into before it starts cutting.
Yep.
And that way I can preset it to the height that I need for that bearing to make contact and not worry about missing the correct depth. Okay? And then we'll lock it in and we'll make the first pass with all of that. So first step is going to be just to drill a hole in each of these to kind of set myself up for success, as it were.
Yep. Don't want to cut the wrong thing.
No. That's important in many aspects. Okay? So we went to the drill press and we cut out. I didn't bore out the whole thing. You can certainly do that, and like I've mentioned in past videos, it saves wear and tear on your bits. But I certainly wanted a hole that was large enough. In this case, it's a 3/4 inch hole, so my 1/2 inch bit will comfortably go in it, and then I can start the router once I'm in place, and that'll be good. Okay. All right, so the main goal is to work on like numbers first. So we've got zeroed out right on the block of the wood. Lower that stop, and then we're going to raise it up so that it can travel 1/2 inch for these two areas, and we're going to knock those out. Now, how many millimeters is a 1/2 inch?
12 something.
12 something. That's good. He's doing math live, you know, and it's harder to do math on camera, I've found.
I think I'm going to have to agree with that.
It puts a little pressure on you. So
you gotta think on the spot. You got to think quick.
Yeah, you got to be quick. So anyway, so we're going to set that up. Now, the last thing that I always mention, and people get tired of me saying this, but I'm saying it for Sam's benefit, so really, I know all you guys got this by now, is I have to start so at least half of the first bearing is extended
so that
beyond. So there's something to ride on the template.
Yep.
Okay? And I find that the half of the first bearing is the sweet spot where I'm not left with a little thin layer of wood at the very top because there's a gap between the first bearing and the cutter. Okay?
Yep.
So that's just personal experience. There's no extra charge for that info. All right, so.
Everything else, though, costs
everything
so
else
much
costs
money.
something.
And that's the first two cuts.
Yep, those are the 1/2 inch ones right there. And now we're going to move on to 3/4 inch. That's our 19 millimeter, and it looks like we only have one of those that we've got mapped out.
Time to do.
All right, we're getting there. And remember, the important thing about this weight relieving template system is if you don't need to remove a lot of weight, you can either take a more shallow depth or you can choose the areas of the weight reduction to create a better balance for what you want to do. So there's flexibility in it. But we're going to go to 1 inch deep for these remaining areas, 1 1/4 over here. So let's go and knock out all the 1 inch now. I'm going to keep this at the same setting, and then I'll come back and do the extra little bit after the fact. All right, we got one more thing that we've got to do, but I wanted to point this out, and that is this one area over here is intended to be 1 1/4 inches deep. I thought that going a full 1 1/4 might exceed the reach capability of that router bit. So we can either swap to another router bit, or the easiest thing is take the template off, because now this
Can be the template.
can be the template. Exactly.
Yup.
You're good at this. All right.
My brain works at least 6% of the time.
Well, that's more than many people. So all we have to do is take a 1/4 inch more off. So I'll set this bit to the bottom, and then I will set it up to remove about 6 millimeters and lock that into place. And again, double check, well within the reach capability here.
Don't go too far.
Yep. And
you
so,
will regret it.
No, don't want to go through the backside. Or you know what happens when you actually go all the way through the guitar?
I don't. But enlighten me.
It's called a design modification.
I see.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so here we are coming in close, and you can see we are talking about some really serious weight reduction, but we've left the area for the rear cavity to be done from the back. But you can see all the different areas are planned for a certain depth, very strategically, and executed just like that, and produce just incredible weight reduction. Plus, we got a little tiny hole, round hole right there to cap off all the weight reduction. We saw the close-up, but I mean, all of these routs are done very strategically, even including this round hole right here, and that's for proper resonance of the guitar.
Kind of.
Oh, okay. He's not buying it.
Kind of.
But you can add that as your controversial thing. The round hole near the end is really what gives it the magic.
That is very true, yeah.
Yeah, so
that much we can agree on.
When you go off of the checklist that those of you who requested, you will see that in part 9, we talk about forearm contours and things like that. And for the top access, top-loaded Strat-style guitar with the pickguard, we are going to do it in part 9. But because we have to glue the top onto this, if we are going to do a forearm contour, and really who wouldn't on a Stratocaster-style guitar, we have to do it now. Okay, so we're going to do this with one of the jigs that I made up, and I think on part 9 I'll just show you the manual process of doing it. In order for my jig to work for my forearm contour jig that I've done a past video, I'll try to link it down below if you need it, I'm going to need the profile cut out from here to probably here. All right, so we just went and I cut this one area out just so I could use my forearm contour jig properly. But we got that. I did take like a sander and I just beveled, not really beveled, I just kind of smoothed over the edges to create more of a radius, because when we bend, it'll be easier to bend to a radius than to a hard edge like the table saw just cut. So we've got that, and you could begin to maybe see some of the thought process behind the weight relief, in a sense that I spread it out almost like a spider web or something, so there's still good support for that top as we bend it over all of these segmented sections in there. And to give you a close look, what I mapped out is basically space on either side of where that bend takes place. So I am going to have to plan for that top to be bent right in that area. So that's going to be the critical thing for me to figure out, and that's what we're going to look at next. And Sam, it's looking cool, isn't it?
I think so.
He commented off camera that, man, it's starting to look like a guitar. And this is what I say on my videos all the time, is when you get to the point where you're about to carve out, you know, this entire body shape, and we'll do that in this episode, that it starts getting exciting because you feel like you've got a guitar that's almost ready to play. And there's still a lot of work to come, but at least you can air guitar it at that point. You know, so
it was just a block of wood before this episode. So.
Yeah. So this is coming together nicely. So we're going to shift gears here, and we're going to talk about this Claro walnut, fractured, repaired, epoxy embedded, and how we're going to deal with bending that over the contour. So there's a couple steps we got to break down. First off, we have to figure out exactly where the guitar is going to be on here. So I like to very simply take a body template and lay it over top. The clear acrylic, the benefit of the clear acrylic is I can lay it over top right on down the center line, and I can see visually what it's going to look like. And I'm going to move this as far as I can down and still maintain the structural integrity of my alignment pin, because I think that will give me more of this epoxy area and look a lot cooler. So my first step is to drill a couple of these holes. Yeah, so this is about the only time that I use double-sided tape with these templates, because most of the time I don't need it, but when I'm drilling these anchor points, the alignment pin holes, I really want it to lock in so that I don't get done drilling one hole and this side shifts, and then all of a sudden doesn't have the alignment that I wanted, or the spacing. You know, if it shifts, it could adjust that. Now we're going to have to prep this top a little bit in order to bend it, and to do that, I'm just going to insert these pins to anchor it, just to make sure that I'm not slipping and sliding away. All right, so now what I'm doing is just tracing the back of the top, because when I'm going to use a vacuum press to actually glue this down, and to do that, you don't want to have extra top hanging over the edge, because a vacuum press will actually snap those sides off, and it will probably do it not in the place that you want it to snap off. Okay, so I'm going to trim it to be just on or barely outside that line, and then that'll put me in a good position for the vacuum press, and it'll also identify the lower bout area where my forearm contour is going to be, so it'll help me kind of figure out what I've got to do in order to prepare this to be bent, because there's a very specific process that I'm going to show you here today. All right, so now we got it cut so that it's going to be a perfect size for this, and it'll get bent in the vacuum bag without breaking off the edges. Sam asked a really good question, though, didn't you, Sam?
I did.
What was the question?
Do we want to save these?
Do we want to save those? That was the question. No, the offcuts from what we just trimmed off of this top. And the answer to that question is yes. What I always recommend to my students is all these little cutoffs, put in a box and save until you're completely done your project. And the reason being is if I, in the routing process, have a blowout or something like that and it cracks off part of this edge, I could use something that came off close to that edge to begin to find something where the grain patterns match, and I can kind of graph it back in and I can recover. Not all the time is a pretty recovery, and that's when you're changing to maybe a bursted edge or something like that. But if you have some matching material and you can find something close, there's a chance you can always repair it. So, so building a guitar is always about making mistakes and learning from those mistakes, but the thing that makes the difference between someone with a lot of experience and little experience is not that you make mistakes or don't make mistakes, it's how well you can recover from mistakes because you have the experience of doing it. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So that's why we save these offcuts. So I just wanted to point that out since he asked a very astute question a little earlier. All right, so let's get back and show you what we're going to do here. So here's the key: is when you're working with a 1/4 inch top, is there are ways to bend a 1/4 inch top, but it generally requires heat and moisture. So that heat will cause that moisture to produce steam, and that steam kind of loosens up the fibers of the wood and will allow some flexibility. Kiln-dried wood tends to have a little less flexibility than something that was air-dried, so that's a consideration too. But what I've also found is that if we can undercut the backside of the forearm contour bevel area, then we will reduce the thickness from essentially being a 1/4 inch to making it an 1/8 inch, and an 1/8 inch will bend a lot easier than a 1/4 inch, and we can use just some moisture to kind of loosen up the fibers, and then we can use the vacuum bag to go over top. Let me show you that real close. This is the outside parameters of where my bend takes place. And I've outlined that area as do not exceed, and then I also use tape on the sides. I want to keep the the scoring process that we're going to do about about a 1/4 inch away from the edges, and that way it doesn't go through. All right, so we're going to work in that area, and I've got a piece of double stick tape ready to go, and I'm going to use just a small strip of melamine. I decided to choose something a little thicker to create my first barrier. Okay, so that if I'm plunging this down and I lift it up, I'm not going to skip over that. So I've got a point now where I'm going to be able to plunge down and work left and right until I get to my stops and be able to route this area out. And then I'll do a second one and a third one and maybe a fourth one. Anyway, I'm using a 1/16 inch bit in this Dremel tool with kind of the plunge base. And so I'll separate a 1/16 inch cut, maybe a 1/16 inch gap, or solid piece, another 16 inch route in there, and I'll kind of stagger them to create a weakness that will bend and conform easily. So that's what we're going to do now. All right?
Let's do it.
All right, so if you can see this first slot here, it's the beginning of what we're going to do. We've got our outline where we don't want to exceed, and we're set there, and we've done one strip, and now we're going to do probably 3 more, 2 more, 3 more, whatever we comfortably need to actually weaken that area to bend it. So I'm just going to go and set that up and continue right along, and you'll kind of get a feel for it as we go and as we finish.
We're getting somewhere.
We are making some progress here. So I've got now 4 rows, approximately spaced. It doesn't have to be perfect. The whole thing is you remove about half of the material, and it makes it just a lot easier for it to bend. And that's what we're doing here. So I've got 4 rows of a 1/16 inch bit separated by a 1/16 or so each pass, and that will give us enough flexibility in this to bend that over top of our guitar body.
Yes.
Theoretically.
Hopefully it won't break.
Yeah. So the epoxy is mostly avoiding this area, but there's a couple small spots that are going to be there, and that may crack, and we may have to fill it. But from the back side, you can see the main vein is here, and another vein is here, so it's pretty close, and maybe a little one down there, but there shouldn't be a whole lot to get in the way. Epoxy doesn't bend that well, and that's part of the decision-making process. My thought process was, well, I could bend it over the forearm contour while it's still cracked and then fill it, but because of the weight relief that I knew I was going to do in all the holes, the epoxy would just run and fill in the holes. And what would be the point of the weight relief if that happens? So doing a minor repair if we have to is not going to be as big of a problem as it was trying to keep the epoxy out of the weight relief holes. And that is what led my decision to do this. So let's move on to the next stage, where we're going to go over to the vacuum press system, and we're going to start slathering this up with some glue and get that ready. I'm going to get this wet, and then we are going to bend the top over the guitar body and attempt to create that beautiful forearm contour. Now it's time the gluing process. Now I've already taken the top and I wet it down. You don't have to be shy about it. It's not going to hurt anything. I'm using Type-On original wood glue, so it'll take the wood glue a little longer to do its thing, but that's okay. The most challenging part of this is going to be bending this, so we want to make sure those fibers are loosened up a little bit. So we're going to do that. And I'm going to put glue all over, because the top is matching, right? So I'm going to put it all over all of these areas. And we'll spread that around. And we want it to be enough glue, but not too much glue. So what is that? Well, I've pointed out in previous videos, but if you ever look at instructions, it talks about the glue is still translucent, but there's full coverage. And that's kind of what it talks about. So we're going to try to do full coverage. I don't want to get glue in these weight relief, because then it'll just start adding weight to it. So I may have to, if it spills over the edge, I may have to wipe it out a little bit before I go forward. Okay, so that's pretty good coverage. I may need a little bit more as I go. When I'm doing tight areas like this, I like to use a tool like this. This is just a sponge stamping tool, and it'll absorb a lot of this glue initially, which is why I may have to apply more glue. But what it does is it helps me control the amount of glue, because once it gets fully saturated, it'll start giving off a certain amount, and it seems to be most of the time a really good amount, where I don't have so much where squeeze out is going all over the place, but not so little that starvation is taking place. Okay, I'm liking what I see. We've let this top soak. I actually poured a little bit of water inside those grooves to let it absorb. I'll take out any extra stuff right now, and we will start this process. Now, there's one other key element about doing drop top construction that you really need to know, and that is I'm not going to drive these pins all the way down like I did before. I'm just going to drive them down just enough where it goes through the top and into the main body piece. And the reason is I still need these holes for future processes. So now I'm going to have half of the hole still exposed from the back, and I can use that as a guide to re-drill out this hole. All right? So that is an important thing. If you do not do that, then you will be slightly guessing about where that hole belongs. We'll try to drill it out from the front, and it may or may not track perfectly straight or not. But I definitely want those alignment pins on to prevent this top from slipping and sliding away. Is that the second time I've used that phrase?
I think so.
You know, I gotta come up with more creative words. All right, so now we got this. You can see I'm still really wet on the top, which is a good thing, and I'm gonna slide it into the bag. There's a sheet of like perforated plastic under here. Mesh, I guess, would be a better term for it. And all that is to allow air to circulate, to pull it down nicely.
Time to pull a vacuum.
Yeah.
At least a little bit.
There it goes. I'm gonna take it out easy. Okay, this is the area that's going to start bending. It feels good. It feels a lot of flex there, but I'm just going to let that air come out nice and easy.
It looks pretty pliable.
Yeah, so far feels good. It's got a little bit more to go, but again, I'll let it move and stabilize and move. Got about another 1/4 inch to go. About 1/8 of an inch. I think we're there. I think this is gonna fully suck down. Like I can push it all the way down and I can hold it. There's a little bit of probably that epoxy doing its thing, cracking a little bit, but all right, now we're just gonna, now that we got it in and we got it fully bent, we're just gonna go for it. Yeah, feels solid. That's what you want. There's no visual cracks through the system that I can see. And I feel like it's going to be pretty good. If anything, there may be some hairline fractures that will fill the same way we did with the major cracks, and it'll just blend into the whole theme. So we're feeling pretty good about this. aren't we, Sam?
Yes.
Normally I would leave this in the vacuum bag for about an hour and then pull it out and let it rest overnight. Because I wet the top down so significantly, I'm going to leave it in there probably for 2.5 hours and then pull it out and let it rest overnight. Just to give it more time. When in a vacuum bag, there's not a lot of place for moisture to go, for evaporation to take place. So I'll give it more time, and then I'll let it rest out exposed in the air to get that evaporation to fully take place and everything to dry back and for the glue to do what it was designed to do.
Okay.
So we have got done all we can do for today, but it's not all we can do for this episode. So we're going to give that top overnight to rest. There it is. Can you hear it in the background? That's the vacuum kicking back in again, keeping it charged up. And we're going to continue this episode once that's fully cured and ready to go. And Sam's back with me today.
I made it back.
He made it back, and we are going to finish what we started here, and we've got a few more things that I want to cover. I'm going to cover some of them a little quicker because a lot of the routing you've already seen in part 8A. However, there are some differences when we do a drop top construction as opposed to a top loading construction, and I'm going to spend a little bit more time pointing those things out. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is the neck pocket. So this is pretty straightforward. I don't have anything additional to add other than what was said in part 8A. So we're just going to jump to it. We're going a 5/8 inch deep. Remember, 5/8 is based upon a heel being 1 inch thick. And if you're thicker or thinner, then you have to adjust the pocket from there. But we're going to go and we're going to get that done right away. And then we're going to move on to some interesting things. All right, so now we've got our neck pocket in place. Now, we talked a lot before about the order of operations, about, you know, should we do the perimeter of the guitar before doing all the pockets, which is what we did on this one. And there's pros and cons of each, but when we did the perimeter of this guy first and then we did the neck pocket, we could instantly test the fit of the neck. And that was a good thing to be able to do. Well, when you do it in this order of operation, with this material at the end, the neck will not fit in place because obviously it has a thickness to it. And this is blocking it. So we could take to the bandsaw and just kind of cut this area off and then test fit the neck and then adjust it if we need to. And that's certainly something that we could be done. And that's something you have to think about for the order of operations. All right, so when we talk about pickups, there's a lot of different ways that we can do a Strat, and it's certainly acceptable to do variations of what would be your standard single coil type of guitar. This guitar here is going to be what I call an HSS. Okay, so it's going to have a humbucker in the bridge, and it's going to have a single coil and a single coil. Now, some people call that an SSH, and I've never been able to truly figure out why the order is different for some people. I think of it from position 1 on the selector switch is the bridge position, so that's why I think of it that way. But however you think of it, we're going to do a humbucker in the bridge, and we're going to do 2 single coils for this guitar. Now, when we do the rear route option and a drop top option for me, that it's because I don't want to use a pickguard. As someone commented in the last video, it would be a shame to cover up this with a pickguard. It absolutely would be, and that's why we have a rear route option so that the cavity can be from the back and you keep as much of this beautiful walnut visible and all the grain and all of the gold and all the crazy stuff like that. And that is a great option. When I make these template systems, I really make them I try to make them for worst case, because there is some variation in certain pickup manufacturers, and I try to make them with a little extra room in order to have compatibility with more. Now, if I find that there's incompatibility with a brand or a type or or anything like that, then I'll kind of redesign and re-engineer it and try to make it more compatible in the future. So in this case, we're looking at an HSS. And so the key thing is you want to get a good fit. If you're not going to use a pickguard, then you want that fit to be tighter than you would normally want if it's going to be a pickguard on top. And you can afford to be a little looser, and because it's all going to get covered up. So I make these when they don't have the slot interconnecting them like we would use for a pickguard version. I make these a little bit smaller so that it's a slightly tighter fit. But you need to try. You need to put your pickups in there, and you need to see what the fit is, and you can then line it with tape if you need to take out a little bit of that room if you want it to be tighter. Now you do have to leave enough room for finish to go in there, so you can't make it so it just kind of slides in there with friction all around, because that's not gonna work when you have finish, and number two, it's not going to be enjoyable to get that out if you need to. So you need a little bit of room, but it doesn't have to be too much. All right, so that's where test fitting comes in. Now I also want to talk about, before I go into test fitting, I want to talk about different type of single coils. What I just showed you here is a very common Strat pickup that has a trapezoid shaped, and that's kind of a loose interpretation, I guess, of that shape, but of a Stratocaster pickup. So it's got that little area that kind of comes down, and it needs that notch out, that little V notch out at the bottom in order to fit in the cavity. And certainly that is more than appropriate for anything that you would want to do with a pickguard on it, because you're only going to see, the top part. However, if you want to make a rear access cavity guitar with areas that are a little tighter fitting, then you can get something like this pickup. Now this is made custom by a lot of manufacturers. This one happens to be made by Righteous Sound Pickups out of Austin, Texas. And I like to request these because it creates a tighter, more streamlined fit in the top of a guitar that's not going to have a pickguard. And I like the looks of that. Now what they do is they basically use the base plate off of a Jaguar pickup, but they wind it still like a Stratocaster pickup. So it is a Strat pickup, it just has a different base plate, and therefore it fits into a slot. So I'll show you what I'm talking about up close. If you look at the standard Stratocaster pickup, you know what I'm talking about. It looks just like this. And then the one that is built on a Jaguar base is still a Strat single coil style pickup, but now it's a perfect oval. So it will fit in a little smaller cavity than the traditional one.
Crazy.
It is crazy, isn't it? But a lot of companies don't sell them kind of off the shelf, but I know I've purchased them from Lawler before, and obviously Righteous Sound, and I'm sure many others. I think I've seen them from Seymour Duncan and all the big players out there. So I know it's an option that most of them offer, but you have to kind of request it in at least all the cases that I know of, and they custom make it to that form factor. Now the other thing that you want to do is always do a good test fit. So what I like to do is take the template and take a scrap piece of wood. This is just a leftover chunk of alder. And I would take my template system and just temporarily double stick tape it in place onto here and route it out and see how well the pickup fits. Do I have to add some tape in there to kind of mask it off to get a tighter fit? If that's what I want, then that's what gives you the information you need. Do it once, test fit it again maybe, flip it over, do it on the other side, and you can figure it out. I did that test fit with these pickups right here. So I've got my oval, Jaguar-based oval Stratocaster pickup, and I've got the humbucker down there. And so I test fit and make sure I had just enough room to slip in and out easily, but not too much. Now it just so happens that I have both of those as options, and the oval style, what we call our Sweet S series, a kind of Stratocaster style guitar, the oval version of this rear access template set is just recently available. So I've used that for a long time myself, but I just made it available because I figured I'm going to use it on this build, and if I use it on this build, there's probably others that may want that option in their building rather than using the traditional. So we're going to route out these 3 pickup cavities, and before we get going, let me just point out, we talk about in many other episodes of pre-drilling with a Forstner bit, and for these smaller ones, it's very important to get the bit started extended at that appropriate height where the bearing is going to make contact with the acrylic. So I use 1 3/4 inch hole kind of in the center, but I could drill out that entire area like I did for this humbucker. And it's going to make it a little easier, it's going to be a little less wear and tear, but you have to have at least 1 hole to start the 1/2 inch bit inside of, and then engage your power in order to keep from mistakes happening and templates getting ruined and possibly the guitar getting damaged too. All right, so that's what I did with that. Now we're gonna go ahead and route this out.
With hearing protection.
With hearing protection. All right, let's see what we got here. You can see the wire routes kind of in the bottom area of the pickups. All right, and everything is smooth down to 3/4 of an inch in perfect size based upon what our testing did. Sam, what do you think about that? Does that look pretty good?
I think it looks great.
Yeah, it's exactly what the template wanted it to be, right? So this is kind of the nice thing about this. Now we can certainly try our pickups and see how they fit. And what you're gonna find in this case here is they don't fit. Why didn't they fit? We did a test. That's what I'm about to show you. The radius that we need in order to get covered pickups to fit properly, and probably some uncovered ones too, depending upon how the base plate is designed, is we need a 1/4 inch bit. Okay, the 1/2 inch bit that I use for the main routing produces a 1/4 inch radius, right? And that is too large of a radius for most covered pickups, pretty much all covered pickups and most uncovered pickups. So what we need is a 1/4 inch flush cutting bit that produces a 1/16, that produces an 1/8 inch radius. Half of the diameter.
Yeah.
You got that, right?
I'm trying to think if it's actually the radius of it, because it's an 1/8 inch bit, right?
This is a 1/4 inch bit.
1/4 inch bit.
So the radius would be half of that.
The radius would be 1/8.
Yeah.
I know how to do math.
Yeah,
I
you're
just
with me.
haven't done it in a while.
You're with me. So here is that bit. It is a very specialized bit because it's got a super tiny bearing on there. And you don't want to do any major cutting with this bit. But what I do after I get the cavity where it is right then, I clean up all of those little corners in the pickup and those little extension areas in order to get this to fit right without it being sloppy. Now, if we do the same thing that we just did, you will see that this pickup goes perfectly flush inside that cavity. Isn't that pretty? That is
a great fit.
That is a great fit. Really snug, just enough room to slide in and out easily and for finish. But that 1/4 inch flush cutting bit is the secret. The next thing I would be doing is talking about the bridge, and in this case, it's set up for a tremolo. Now, I've got some thoughts of whether or not I want a tremolo on this guitar or whether I want a fixed bridge on this guitar. Now, obviously, a Strat is known for having a tremolo, but a lot of people love fixed bridges. So there's some options. So I'm not sure which I'm going to go with. So I'm going to hold off on doing the tremolo route. If you're just coming into this part 8B and you want to see that done, I did it on this guitar body back in 8A. So you can refer back to that to see how that's done. So I'm going to bypass that for the time being and catch up hopefully in part 9 of this series, hopefully after I've figured out what I want to do. That's the hard part, making up my mind.
Decisions.
Yeah. All right, so what we're going to move on to is talk about drilling the holes. While you have the top on and before I do the rear rout cavity, I want to drill the holes. And I don't have to drill them all the way through, but I have to drill them at least beyond the top. And I like to do it now because if you already rout out the back and then you drill the holes, you are going to have some of the wood fibers blow out on the back side. If we do it while the wood's solid and then rout it out, we are going to have really nice, clean holes all the way to the inside cavity. So on the standard template system, what you'll see is a template that is for the blade switch. And that's kind of a special thing that I show, I guess I didn't show in the last episode. That's kind of a special thing that I will show you how that's done. But then I've got 3 1/8-inch holes to punch in order to mark the positions and then take to the drill press and drill those holes. And then we've got a route for the standard Stratocaster style jack plate. All right, so that is all located on the standard template. Now, I will also tell you that I have the ability to also create these in a different way. And the different way is with 5 1/8-inch holes, and instead of putting the jack plate on the surface, we are going to put the jack plate on the side of the guitar, almost Tele-esque, okay? And this is for options, okay? And I happen to like options. But with this option of 5, I can do one of many things. I could drill only 2 of these holes and have just a volume and a tone. I could drill all 3 and have pretty much standard Stratocaster style of control knobs in a straight line. I can also just do 4 in a square and turn this almost Les Paul-esque in the positioning of the knobs. All right, so there's options there. And for me, I do some kind of crazy electronics, and I'm going to actually use all 5 of these holes. So I'm going to use this template, and I'm going to punch those and drill them out for the appropriate size. I have very specific sizes for each of these holes. So I'm going to drill those out, get those ready, and then I'm going to come back and do the rear cavity route. All right, so we went and we drilled the holes. I have a very specific configuration, so my holes are going to be probably sized and spaced, specific to my needs. But within one of those 2 configurations, you can certainly achieve whatever your preference is for potentiometer, configuration, switches, and things like that. Why don't we just stay on the front since we're here, and then we'll catch the back. All right, we just brought this back from flush cutting the edge. You guys should have seen that. That was really exciting. But you didn't because we didn't have the camera on. Anyway, got it all flush cut. We're ready for the back, but this is looking gorgeous. I wiped it down with a little naphtha again just to kind of give it a rich appearance of what it's going to look like with finish on it. All right, same thing on the back. Really coming together nicely. Now it's time to do the rear cavity for all the electronics. All right, the back cavity templates have a few different parts to it. So this is obviously the main one. Located on this one is also a spoke wheel notch. If you're using a spoke wheel style truss rod, then you use this back template on the front of the guitar, and that makes your little cutout for your spoke wheel for that style of truss rod. But also on the back, we have got cut out the tremolo cover. If you're going to use a more traditional cover plate, this would become your template for making that and covering it up. Now, it also leaves this area, which is the negative of the tremolo cover. So a lot of times what I like to do is actually recess the tremolo cover so it's flush and flat with the back. It kind of gives it a little cleaner look. And in this case, because I showed you earlier that I cut off a layer of this back that I'm going to use for the cover plates, I could also use it for a tremolo cover plate so that all the wood kind of blends in, the covers match the body, and it kind of disappears. So I could certainly do that. Now here is the main cutout that we're going to use for the electronics cavity itself. And we're going to take that all the way down to about 1/4 inch. So right when we start touching the walnut top from the back to the front, that's about the point that we're going to stop with this. All right, and this also gives holes that we can punch for drilling our holes. But before we do that, we're going to do something different. Inside of this area, I have a couple other templates that I include, and it's really this one piece that we need. And I'm going to show you, if you're using a front jack plate, how you can take this large cavity cover and do a split level to it in order to have one thicker level where the jack plate will mount and the jack go through, but have enough meat for the screws to really hold well from the front. And then the other piece is just waste, but the other part of the cavity then would be that full depth. So we're going to start off, and when we're doing it this way, I like to leave maybe about 1 inch of meat for that jack plate to recess into. It could be less than that, but that's certainly not a bad starting point. So what I'm going to do is take the entire cavity down from 1 3/4 down about 3/4, and that'll leave about 1 inch left. And then we'll use this template to stair step and do the rest of it inside. All right, we got this, the Forstner bit taken down about 3/4 of an inch. And now we're going to take the rest of the material that we need to get down to a 1 inch total thickness approximately. And then I'll show you that split shelf in the back, because this is a key thing for the template set that has the 3 holes and the output jack plate installed in the front like a traditional Strat style guitar. All right, now we got that first step done. Now, one thing I forgot to mention is another thing for this tremolo cover plate template is when you're routing out on the back, slip that into place, and that'll keep that back flat so that the router doesn't have a tendency to dip on you. So that's just a little safety precaution just to make it a little bit easier. But that's looking good so far. So let's move on to the second step. All right, so now when we want to go deeper on one side but not the other, we need something to act as a guide for that. And that's what this one piece of cutout that came from this template is all about. All we're going to do is we're going to put that in place, and we're going to double stick tape it, and then we're going to drill at least, an extra hole in the center to kind of get the bit started at the same way that you would do the edge, with that bearing going to be just barely touching, at least half of that bearing touching that acrylic piece down there. All right, so I took the Forstner bit and took out a little bit more, just shy of my final depth. I maybe have a 1/2 inch of material left at the bottom, and we're going to use this piece of acrylic in that one side as a template. All right, so we have to make sure we get that bit deep enough. Now, since we've already got an established perimeter here, I don't need the template on here anymore. So that's going to give me an extra 1/4 inch of reach of my router bit, so hopefully I can make it all the way with the same bit. If I can't, then I'm going to have to swap out to a different bit to get that extra reach, a longer bit. All right, so let's set this up. Overall, the depth that I need is from the surface down 1.5 inches. All right, so 25 plus 12 is 37-ish. All right, the top of the acrylic is about 9/16. All right, so 9/16 would put about 3/4 of that bearing on that acrylic. So, if my math is correct,
Which it always is.
not
Maybe
always,
not.
not always. On live camera, I mess it up all the time. All right, so there is our shelf and the template that we used to create the shelf, and then all the way down to approximately 1/4 inch, right about where that walnut started. And so that is complete for that portion of the pocket. So here's the thing. If you were using a template that created the traditional Strat jack plate right here, now you would have that routed out already, or you would route it out now, and it would take down to intersect with the shelf in there. Now you have room for the screws. Everything's very secure. It has a very traditional look with the 3 potentiometers and then the jack plate itself. And that's how you would do it. So if that wasn't clear for anyone that already has this template set and what to do with that piece, that was the demonstration for you. So thank you. Now, since I'm not going to do this, I'm going to take the settings that I've already have, and I'm going to pull that out, and I'm going to continue to route this so it's all the same level, because that's the way that I'm going to be using this guitar, or building this guitar. I mean, we still got a belly cut, and depending upon what we use for a bridge / tremolo, this is going to be pretty cool.
This is going to be really light. Although, you are going to put a ton of electronics in it.
Yeah. So this is right where I want it to be. This is about 4 pounds. And that's typically my sweet spot, is right around 3.75 to 4.25 pounds, somewhere in that range. So we have removed enough weight reduction to get this, I mean, right where it needs to be. It's going to be a little bit lighter after the belly carve, and that'll be the low end of my sweet spot for weight, for sure. So that's looking pretty good. All right, so now that we've got the back main cavity all routed out, the only thing left to do in today's episode, and I apologize once again, but this is probably going to be a really long episode because it's taken a really long time to record this with all the different camera angles and all the different steps and processes, and my normal over-articulating detail, but most people like it. But anyway, so this will be the last step where we do the little lip around there. And as Sam was asking me earlier, I'm going to do about 3 millimeters lip for the cover to recess. And we said, well, is that how big your piece of wood that you cut off the back of the guitar is? And the answer is no. That's probably less than 1/8 of an inch there. Probably half of that. I don't know, maybe a little more, maybe 3/32. But here's what I do. In the end, I'm going to bond something to this, maybe carbon fiber or something like that, and then I will sand down the wood to whatever I need to get it to fit perfect.
Yep.
Okay, but I want the structural integrity. This doesn't have to be any more than a veneer when it's all said and done. It's just more of the decorative aspect of it. So the last lesson of the day, if everybody's still hanging with me, is, again, it's router bit selection. We've been using this bit all day long, and it would be easy just to continue using this bit.
Yes, it would.
So what we need is a specialized bit. There's 2 ways to tackle this. You can either elevate the template a little bit so that you can make a shallow pass with a bit like this, or the easiest thing is to have a specialty bit like this. It's an 1/8 inch bit. So that is going to allow me to take about an 1/8 of an inch cut and have the bearing riding on the acrylic the entire time. All right, yep. So that's where we need more than one bit to do guitar making. There's a lot of different bits for a lot of different things. And just in case some of you don't know, I just recently set up an Amazon influencer, I don't know, page, I guess is what it's called. But I'm going to link it in the description below. But a lot of these bits that I use, and specialty bits, I list on there. And if you purchase it through the link below, then I get a little commission from Amazon. So it helps me out too. So if you want to look for something like this, I'll try to add it to my main registry or whatever it's called, and so you can easily find it. All right, now we can take the template off. We're done with that. And some little fuzzies on the top. That'll sand right off. But now we've got our lip so that when we do our matching cavity cover, it'll be recessed in there, nice and flush. It'll match perfectly with the grain, and that would be pretty cool looking for sure.
That it will, I hope.
All right, long episode. I'm exhausted. Whenever I start feeling exhausted, I know it's a long episode. So there's a lot of meat here that probably I'm going to trim down as much as I can, but probably won't be able to trim down as far as I want to. But here it is. We are all done, all the main shaping. We got a couple things left to do. In the next episode, we're talking about belly contours. I'll show you how to do the blade switch slot in the top, which is a little bit tricky too, but the template is designed to help you with that. And this beautiful drop top environmental series laminated guitar body is going to be a beauty. Going to be a beauty for sure.
I'm going to have to agree with that.
Yeah.
It already looks so good.
Yeah. Little roundovers on the front and back, make it comfy, and it's going to be awesome. We covered a whole lot today. Thanks for hanging with us. Sam, thanks for hanging with me for 2 days. Hopefully you got something for your program out of the deal.
Thanks for having me. I think I've got enough to write 7 pages.
And graduate high school.
God, I hope so.
All right. Hey, remember, no matter what you do, start with excellence.